Welcome back to my farm. Now you might wonder what I'm out here doing right now, and today's video is as a result of a number of questions and a number of answers put on various other people's videos recently. So we'll start with the fact that Driver has been releasing some videos recently of what's the game called? Can't remember now. Ranch Simulator. So Driver's been playing this game called Ranch Simulator, which is just similar to Farming Simulator, but it sits on an American ranch, so you can only farm in America, I understand. And one of the things you can do on Ranch Simulator that you couldn't do on Farming Simulator is you can go hunting for bears and rabbits and things like that. Now, in New Zealand, we don't have any bears or anything. And this is a Winchester rifle. We'd actually use shotguns in New Zealand, but one of the pests that we go after, or the only pests really that farmers need to worry about in New Zealand, are rabbits and possums. Now, possums you go hunting for at night and use torches, and their eyes show up as red lights, red pinpricks in the night, and rabbits you go hunting for during the day. As I said, I've got a Winchester rifle here, but you'd actually normally use a shotgun often if you were going shooting for possums or rabbits in New Zealand, and that's really the only pests that, so I'll just put that rifle away now, that you have to worry about in New Zealand. Now, I am going to show you in a couple of minutes some pictures of possums, because the New Zealand possum, well, it's actually the Australian possum, they're not native to New Zealand, they're Australian, is quite a different animal from the North American possum. And I've got a tractor here, which we'll talk about in a moment too, and this is meant to be an 80 series FiatAgri. So if I go to my photos now, before we carry on, and I'll show you why we're doing this. So this is just how I get out of my game when I want to. So we'll kill that, leaving the game running, and go to the photos. Here we go. So this is what a North American possum looks like, and I know that Eustace Pharmer actually had a pet possum at one stage, so this is not the kind of possum we go killing in New Zealand because they're a pest. An Australian possum, which is the possums we get in New Zealand, look more like this. They're very, very vicious creatures. They've got very sharp teeth and very long claws, and they kill, like this one you can see in this picture is eating an egg. That would probably be a native New Zealand bird egg, because they raid the nests of native New Zealand birds and kill them. So they really are a pest, and they breed like you wouldn't believe. So yeah, they're an absolute pest in New Zealand, and farmers will often go out shooting them. Now, the reason I've chosen that tractor to use today, and I'll show you here, is the Fiat 90 series tractor. So the one we're using there is actually a 11090, looks almost identical to the 80 series tractor. Now, when I was a child, so the reason I do dairy farming in Farming Simulator, instead of crop farming really, is when I was a child, when I was about 10, I went and spent about 6 or 7 weeks on a dairy farm, and when I was about 11, I lived for a year on a sheep farm. Now in Farming Simulator you can't really do sheep farming because there's really nothing to do with the sheep. They're very easy to feed, the wool just magically appears in the paddock next to the feed trough, there's nothing to it. Whereas in real life you have to put them through sheep dip to get rid of the, you dip them to get rid of, stop them from getting fly blown and stop them from getting lice type things. You also have to dock the tails of lambs, and there's 2 different ways you can dock the tails. You can either use docking rings, so you put a ring on the tail, and the tail that cuts off the blood circulation to the tail, and the tail slowly drops off over the coming weeks, and you'd find the ring and the tail somewhere in the paddock sort of thing. Or you can burn them off with a hot iron or hot knife blade, which was the method that we used when we lived on a sheep farm for a year, because one of the advantages of burning it off instead of using a docking ring is that the heat of the knife blade, or the iron as it was called, seared the skin straight away, so the lamb didn't bleed at all, and you got to fry up the lamb's tails afterwards and eat them, and they were really, really nice to eat. Now, that might sound like it's animal cruelty. It's really not. If you don't take the tails off a lamb, then it will actually get fly blown and it will end up getting terribly infected and things. So you actually have to take the tails off lambs when they're very young. It's not being mean to them at all. Now, sheep farmers, because there's a lot of sheep farming in New Zealand, one of the other advantages you get, and maybe you get these in America and things already, I don't know, but sheepskin rugs like this are very, very common in New Zealand. You can pick up sheepskin rugs very easily in New Zealand. They're very common. So anyway, I was going to show you what the Fiat. So the farm that I lived on was called Tukuwaru, which is a Maori word, and I don't really know what that translates as. But the farm next door, because it was originally one large farm, and the farmer had two sons, and so the two sons were left the farm, and they divided into two farms. They had one farm each, and the farmer next door to the farm that we lived on, which was the other brother, his farm was called K40. And the reason it was called K40, it was 40 kilometres from the nearest township of any real size. So the farm was called K40. And often in New Zealand, because we measure distance in kilometres for distances travelled, not miles, and often instead of saying it's so many kilometres to the next town, we just, the Kiwi slang would say, oh, it's 20 k's to go, or something like that. So we'd just say k's, you wouldn't say kilometres. And so the farm next door to us, K40, used Fiat 80 series tractors, which look almost identical to the 90 series. So here's a picture of a Fiat 780, so that one would be 70 horsepower. And here's a picture of a 1180 tractor, FiatAgri 1180, so that would be 110 horsepower, I believe, based on how FiatAgri numbered their tractors and things. Now, as you can see, it looks almost identical to the 90 series tractor. This little white striped thing on the cab there is slightly different, but otherwise it's pretty much the same. The 80 series, which was older than the 90 series, often they were in the original Fiat orange, but that was about the time they were changing colour. So some of the 80 series, I believe, were in the terracotta red colour, but certainly the farm next door to us, the K40 farm, had two of them. They had this Fiat 780 and the Fiat 1180, and both of them were in the FiatAgri orange colour. Pretty much otherwise, the only difference between the 80 series and the 90 series, that visually outside, apart from that white stripe that runs there, is the 80 series had round headlights, the 90 series has rectangular headlights. So if I go out of there for a minute now, we will come back to that because I've got a couple of other photos to show you. Go back into the game. So you can see this is actually a 90 series, so I've just repainted into orange, so it's got the wrong shaped headlights, but otherwise this could very, very easily be an 80 series FiatAgri, and that's what the farmer next door to us owned, two of these. But to be perfectly honest, the FiatAgri 80 series, or the FiatAgri tractors, were extremely rare in New Zealand. I've never ever seen another farmer that had FiatAgri tractors. Only the one next door to us is the only farmer I know of in New Zealand that had these tractors, so I don't think they were a common tractor in New Zealand. And this one here is the 110, so that the 11090, so that would be the equivalent of the Fiat 1180 tractor, which is the bigger one of the two that the farmer next door owned. So this would be the equivalent of the big tractor of the two he owned. Now, I remember it. These memories I'm talking of, 44 years old. So this is something that, I remember from 44 years ago. So it's not necessarily what I'm telling you today is how I remember things being. It may not be 100% accurate, and I'm certainly not deliberately trying to mislead or lie to you, but I was, a 10 or 11-year-old child at the time, so my memories may not be 100% accurate to how it really was, what I remember, but this is how I remember it. This would be the big tractor of the two that the farmer had, and they were considered huge tractors at the time, because on the farm that we lived on, they had things like the old Massey Ferguson 135 and things, which would be absolutely tiny next to one of these. So this was considered a very, very big tractor in this day. I don't know whether it would still be a big tractor by New Zealand standards. I don't know whether these two tractors are still around in New Zealand. Taught me, I remember them being almost new tractors 44 years ago, so chances are they're not still around anymore, because I doubt farmers would own 44-year-old tractors now, sort of thing. But yeah, that's why I've always quite liked the FiatAgri tractors in Farming Simulator, because I remember farmer next door who had two brand new tractors, sort of thing, that were extremely huge and extremely flash by New Zealand tractor standards, having a couple of these in this colour and everything. Now, one of the strange things about the FiatAgri, and I mentioned this in one of one of Fury Machine Gaming's videos, and he said he's going to mention it in his next video, and I'm fine for him to do so. But this lever here, you've got two gear levers here. Now the yellow one is your gears 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 type thing, as you can see. The orange one is the one that changes between high and low ratio. Okay, and one of the things I remember very, very vividly about this tractor is it didn't have the words high and low written on that lever. Now I assume the reason it didn't have that, and what it had instead is a picture of a turtle and a picture of a rabbit. And I would assume, it's my assumption here, the reason for that is so they didn't have to make different gear lever tops depending on what country the tractor was being sold in, because obviously high and low would be different in Italian and depending on what other countries they were sold in. Now I'm also guessing, based on the fact that they had a picture of a turtle and a picture of a rabbit on that lever, if you have a look at the front of the tractor here, you can see a rabbit there on that front guard. So I'm guessing, and it's on both sides, I thought it was only on one. Anyway, I'm guessing that maybe the picture of the rabbit there to indicate perhaps, and again, I'm purely guessing here, so I'm not saying this is the fact, I'm guessing that perhaps this is a high-speed model of the FiatAgri tractor, and that's why it had a picture of a rabbit on the front guard there. But yeah, I very, very clearly remember that little lever there, which is orange. I don't remember it being orange, I don't remember the colour of it at all, but I very, very clearly remember that lever there. It didn't say high and low, it had a picture of a turtle and a picture of a rabbit, and that was your high-low ratio lever. Okay? So I thought I'd share that because it was an amusing story and things. And I shared about what I remember about the sheep dipping and the shearing and things on the sheep farm. So yeah, as I said, you can't really do sheep farming in Farming Simulator. I know you can have fields full of sheep, but there's just nothing to do with them. They're not high maintenance or anything at all. Basically, you feed them grass, you don't do anything else with them, and you go and pick up the wool from time to time. If Farming Simulator allowed you to actually do more with the sheep, like actually round them up and take them down to put through the dip and dip them, or take them down to dock the tails on the lambs and shear them, actually round them up and take them to the shearing shed to shear once a year instead of just having wool bales magically appear in the paddock, then I would be a sheep farmer. But since they don't do that, and the only animal in Farming Simulator that really seems to take very much work, well, I suppose the pigs do to some degree, but the chickens seem to be very, very easy work in this game. So apart from maybe the pigs, I've never had anything to do with pig farming whatsoever, so it's not something I really want to particularly try because I don't know anything about it. I do the dairy farming because the cows, at least they take up a reasonable amount of effort compared to, say, the sheep. So if I skip over here for a second, I'll show you, because you might recall that on my farm here I've done a very, very New Zealand style run here. So the cows come all the way down here from the paddocks up the top, and there's gates at every paddock along the way, down into this very, very Kiwi style milking shed here, where the cows can get milked. And so if I just walk down there, come on. Yes, this is the very, very Kiwi style milking shed, this one, called a herringbone style shed, this one. And there's the milk tank where the milk goes, as they're all milked. and you've got the sorting yard here next to the milking shed with a press there that you can use if you're wanting to clip hooves or anything like that, or if you've got an animal that's sickly and you need to call the vet out to look at it, you can use the press there, and you've got the loading ramp here to load them into a stock truck to take off to the meatworks or to the sales yards or whatever. So this is all very, very Kiwi style here, and I have from time to time, you've seen on previous videos probably, where I'm hosing out the yard and bringing cows down the cow run here, following behind my my three-wheeled motorbike, my trike. So I do quite like to, so I've got like these, so I've got the hose, I can hose out the yard after finishing the milking and things. So I admit that in Farming Simulator, you don't actually have to have a milking shed like that, because the milk just kind of magically appears every day, but I like to do that. And if I could do that with sheep and take them down to a shearing shed and things, then perhaps I'd be a sheep farmer on this game, but you really can't do anything like that in this game. It just doesn't allow for it. In fact, the earlier versions of this game didn't even really allow you to do cow farming very well. You could only have like one paddock of cows in earlier versions of this game, and apart from mixing up mixed rations to feed them, there really wasn't very much to do with the cows either. And even now it's very, very limited what you have to do with the cows, which is why I added in that milking shed, and I kind of herd my cows down to the milking shed to milk them, even though the reality is the milk's appearing whether I do that or not, and I like to hose out the yard afterwards and things. One thing that personally I would have liked to see on later versions of Farming Simulator, but alas, to date it hasn't been at any rate, is this game seems to be, as far as I'm aware, quite good at replicating life for a crop farmer and doing crop farming, but it really has very limited ability to be an animal farmer, to do a dairy farm or a sheep farm or anything. And I would actually really, really like later versions of the game to make it possible to be more of an animal farmer and actually do all the things that animal farmers have to do. Actually herd the cows down to the milking shed once a day to milk them, and if you don't do that, you don't get milk. Simple as that. Or having to take sheep to shear them at the shearing shed and things like that. To me, it would make the game a lot more interesting, because at the moment the game is still very, very heavily weighted towards being a crop farmer, and that's all. You can't do any other kind of farming apart from crop farming. So yes, I enjoy doing dairy farming. I do the best I can based on the abilities of the game and the abilities of what I've been able to add to it. But even with those additions and things, sheep farming it's not possible to do it realistically in this game. It is possible to do dairy farming, at the very least semi-realistically, which is what I think I'm doing in this game by having the milking shed there and things. And I do, move the cows about from, I have winter fields and summer fields in order to, I move them from one to the other, so I actually have twice as many fields for cows as what I have fields of cows. So I've got 4 fields of cows and 8 fields for cows. That's not counting my bull paddock and things. So I also have bulls on this paddock, on this farm. And so I have 4 winter paddocks and 4 summer ones. But yes, I do the very best I can. Now the other thing that I quite clearly remember having on the farm that I lived on for a year, back when I was 10 or 11 years old, no, early now, was we had a chaff machine. I'm going to show you what that looked like. So it basically does the same job as a combine harvester, but it's static. It doesn't move around, so you have to move the crops to it rather than moving a combine harvester to the fields. So what a chaff machine looks like, I'm going to show you here. So here's a picture of one here. Now this one is hooked up to what looks like a steam engine here. Okay, and I remember running off these big belts, and I don't remember what the belts were made out of, whether they were leather or I think they were leather belts. We certainly never had a traction engine like this with a big flywheel on it. What we did have is a Massey Ferguson. I think it was a Massey 135, I think, from memory. And on the back of it, we have the PTO on the back. It must have had some sort of a fitment or something. So we had a small wheel like that would bolt onto the PTO unit. And so then you could run something that ran off a big belt like this off the PTO unit, but you were still running off a big belt like that. So we had the Massey Ferguson with the pulley drive on the back, and then a big, what I think was probably a leather belt, but it may not have been leather, running off that, running this chaff machine. If I go to the next picture, you'll be able to see the back of the chaff machine, which is where this guy's standing at the moment. And at the back of the chaff machine, you had two big sacks that you put over here to fill up with the finished product, the chaff, and you had to lift those off when they got full and then replace them with another empty one. And I very, very well remember these two sacks, and obviously I was only 10 or 11 years old at the time, so I didn't get to have to lift any of those sacks or anything. I just got to sit on the tractor and watch pretty much. But I remember my older brother and things doing that job, helping out by moving those big sacks. Now the reason we had one of these machines, and yes, it would have been a very old machine even back 44 years ago when we were doing this, is, as I said, we weren't a crop farm. It was a sheep farm, so I think the crops were just done, the chaff was just done, you know, maybe a couple of paddocks worth or something, I don't really remember exactly, just as an aside, but it was mainly a sheep farm, absolutely a sheep farm. I also remember we had a Dodge truck, and we did small square bales of, it would have been bales of hay, and we had if I escape out of here now, we'll go back to the game, I'll show you. So if I go to here, in the game here, you got these belt systems like this. We had a belt system kind of like that, but bolted to the side of the truck, the flat deck truck. And so what happened, we'll go back out here for a second. So I've got over here what I could call a Bedford truck. It's actually a Ford F600, but we wouldn't have had Ford F600s in New Zealand or anything. But this looks very, very similar to the Bedford J3. Very similar if you want to Google Bedford J3. So we had an old Dodge truck, which was about pretty much the same as an old Bedford truck. And it had the flat deck there. So you'd have this belt thing, it bolts to the side of the truck there, and that would, you'd drive the truck around the field picking up the small square bales. They go up the belt, you have two guys on the back of the truck here grabbing them off the top of the belt before they fell off and stacking them up on the truck. And that's how we picked up our bales. We had a flat deck truck like that with a belt system, so as we drove around the field you could lift the bales and stack them by hand onto the deck of the truck. So that's what we did there. Now I assume this is the same nowadays, but I'm not absolutely certain. We certainly didn't have a combine harvester. It wasn't worth it because we weren't really a crop farmer per se. So we used that chaff machine I showed you a moment ago. But for other farmers, what I think happened in New Zealand a lot, because I don't ever remember seeing combine harvesters on very many farms or anything, so I suspect one of two things happened. Either when it was time to harvest your fields, you get a contractor in who would bring along their own combine harvester, so the contractor would bring the combine and combine your fields for you, or perhaps, like in any particular farming area, perhaps say 1 in 10 farmers did own a combine harvester, so the other 9 farmers in that area or something got the farmer that owned a combine to come in and, you know, as a contractor, and actually, you know, combine the fields when needed. So I'm certain that most farmers in New Zealand, at least 40 years ago, and it's probably the same now, given the price of what they cost, but I can't say for certain, but I'm pretty sure that most farmers in New Zealand do not own a combine harvester of their own. They're just too expensive for farmers in New Zealand to have. So you get a contractor in, or get a neighbour who happens to have one to come in and do all your contracting. So yeah, I just thought I'd share those videos with you. partly because I was talking to Fury Machine Gaming about the FiatAgri tractor and the rabbit and turtle pictures on the lever, partly as a result of seeing Driver go out shooting on his ranch simulator game, and also because of the sheep dipping. So I thought I'd talk about the bits I do know, sort of thing, from sheep farming, and that was a video of AK's. He was looking at sheep dip on one of his farms. So those three people and those three videos, Fury Machine Gaming, well, actually, and also Eustace Pharmer, because he had a pet possum, and so I wanted to mention how the possums were a pest in New Zealand rather than something you'd have as a pet, but the animals are quite different. So yeah, this video was thanks to, in particular, to those 4 people who put out videos recently that made me think of things I wanted to talk about. But that's probably all I'll talk about now, because this video must be getting on a bit. Okay, thank you very much. Bye.